Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the First Emperor of Wei Let's Talk Lore series as we continue with episode 3, titled Cao Zhi, the Poet. Now, as we mentioned in our last episode, the year 208 was a rough one for Cao Cao, as he started the year losing his favorite strategist in Guo Jia before losing his favorite son in Cao Chong. Then by the end of the year, Cao Cao lost his chance to unite China, as he would also lose the Battle of Chibi. For Cao Pi, the year was equally bad. Being born in the winter month of 187 meant that Cao Pi had officially come of age by the end of 207, as the common Confucian coming-of-age ceremony for boys happened at age 20. This meant he could finally be recommended and receive a court position. Yet in January of 208, when the esteemed Grand Excellency of the Masses, Zhao Wen, recommended Cao Pi, Cao Cao rejected the recommendation, as Cao Cao, who was the Grand Excellency of the Works at the time, accused Zhao Wen of flattery and bribery, as Cao Pi had shown no virtues to warrant such recommendation. Now, if we disregard the harsh words about Cao Pi's virtues, Cao Cao's main goal here in rejecting the recommendation was that he needed an excuse to fire Zhao Wen, as by June of the same year, Cao Cao ended up abolishing the Sangong positions of Grand Excellency of the Works, Grand Excellency of the Masses, and the Grand Commandant in favor of just having one prime minister position, which of course he took himself. And at this time, the Grand Commandant position was empty, but Zhao Wen, who was 72 at this time, was a very well-respected official and had held this position for 15 years. So Cao Cao desperately needed an excuse to remove him in order to advance himself as the prime minister before heading south for what he thought was going to be his final campaign on the path to uniting the country. Therefore, Cao Pi's reputation was sacrificed as Cao Cao berated his own son's virtues in public in order to incriminate Zhao Wen, who would go on to die in the same year, not long after getting fired and publicly shamed at such an old age. And because of such a public ordeal, Cao Pi would remain positionless for the next 3 years, as Cao Cao could not give him a court position so soon after publicly stating his lack of virtues. And at the same time, Cao Pi's younger brother from the same mother, in Cao Zhi, would start to rise in Cao Cao's eyes as a new favorite son after the death of Cao Chong. Now, Cao Zhi was born in 192, 5 years younger than Cao Pi, as the third son of Lady Bian, as Lady Bian also had Cao Zhang in 189. Now, while Cao Zhang would grow up as a troubled kid, disliking reading and writing, as he focused on strength training and archery, dreaming to become a general, Cao Zhi was the polar opposite, as he was born to be a scholar. And by the age of 10, Cao Zhi could recite all major Confucian texts from memory, as his literary critiques were so good that Cao Cao could not believe that he had written them himself. So when asked by Cao Cao if he had plagiarized, Cao Zhi confidently responded that even the casual conversations from my mouth are worthy prose, while anything I put my pen to end up worthy papers. And if you don't believe me, feel free to test me now. And it would be this air of confidence that towed the line of arrogance that would catch Cao Cao's eyes, as Cao Zhi would embrace the savant stereotype, as he was recorded to pay very little attention to his own looks in terms of clothing, horse, or items, as this lack of vanity very much matched Cao Cao's taste. And by 206, Cao Zhi, who had just turned 15, finally started to accompany his father on campaigns, much like many of his older brothers. Yet after experiencing his first 2 campaigns, first against the minor Eastern Sea Raider in Guancheng, then against the Wuhuan tribes in Liucheng as the final touch-up to unite the North and end the Yuan clan, Cao Zhi didn't clamor like his older brother Cao Zhang, who demanded to become a general, but instead, Cao Zhi wrote a poem called Bai Ma Pian, or the White Horse Chapter, depicting the brave troops on the frontiers defending the nation from foreign threats. Now, I'll leave the entire poem here with my best attempt at the translations. And like many of Cao Zhi's earlier works, this poem showed a lot of heroism and ambition, as Cao Zhi still had a positive mindset on his future, versus his later works, which would reflect a lot of his personal depressions after falling out of favor, which we'll eventually get to in this series as well. And before we move on, I just want to highlight the last line of this poem here, which would also be its most famous line. 捐躯赴国难，视死忽如归, meaning to donate one's body to the nation in a time of crisis, as death will just be another form of homecoming. Then by 210, after Cao Cao had recovered from his defeat at Chibi, it became apparently clear that the country was trending towards a divide into thirds, as Cao Cao is firmly entrenched in the north, while Sun Quan, protected by the Yangtze River, occupied the south, while Liu Bei was showing signs of seizing the western lands of the Yi province for himself. Unification in the near term was now impossible. Thus, to plan for the long game, Cao Cao passed the first of 3 calls to action hiring edicts during his reign, titled Qiu Xian Ling, which broke with tradition, as he was now willing to accept all the talents regardless of so-called Confucian virtues. As you see, before this point, the Han government relied on a recommendation system for government posts, as one essentially needed to get vouched by either a well-respected scholar or a current court official, stating that they are a person of virtue before they could earn themselves a government post. Cao Cao now deviated from that to attract more talents to his side, as he valued your actual talents rather than your virtues, which opened the doors to all sorts of people previously left out by the political system. For example, those who had a criminal history. Non-gentry clan members, as for the most part, it was difficult for them to secure such a recommendation, and even gentry clan members who had talent, but also had strong vices such as a strong taste for alcohol or too strong of a lust for prostitution, that ended up giving them a bad reputation as a person, thus making it difficult for them to secure a recommendation, as no one wanted to vouch for them. And as a side effect, or perhaps a minor intention of this edict, Cao Pi, who had been previously publicly bashed by Cao Cao as someone who lacked virtue and undeserving of a recommendation, now can be given an official post, as talent is now worth more than virtue. Now, just to be clear, there is no record of Cao Pi actually being virtueless or having any particular vices. The entire claim was just a political ploy to get rid of Zhao Wen and pave the path for Cao Cao to become prime minister. And Cao Pi just happened to be the sacrificial pawn for this move. But now with the hiring edict, Cao Cao made it up to his son in 211, as Cao Pi would end up being named as Wu Guan Zhonglang Jiang, or the Lieutenant of the 5 Posts, where the 5 Posts is a generic term for all officials, which meant that Cao Pi essentially became the vice prime minister, while also gaining a bit of a military role with his own garrison of troops stationed in the capital city. Now, in all regards, this was a heck of a first job, with a lot of responsibility and power, but this did not mean that Cao Pi had become the favorite as of January of 211, because in the same month that Cao Pi received his first post, Cao Zhi would be named as the Marquis of Pingyuan, while Cao Pi, Cao Cao's eldest son at this time, was still titleless. Now, the reason why Cao Zhi got this title, despite not even coming of age yet, is largely because of a poem that he had penned the year prior during the feast celebrating the completion of Cao Cao's palace in Ye, as that night, Cao Cao had asked everyone in attendance to write a poem on the spot in celebration of this palace completion. Cao Pi, who was quite the poet himself, had written one that night. But when compared to Cao Zhi's work, Cao Pi was once again outshined by a younger brother, as Cao Cao, who was also quite the poet himself, started to fall in love with the poetic talents of Cao Zhi. Now we'll go deeper into this exact story and many other literary battles between Cao Pi and Cao Zhi, as the battle for air has officially started following Cao Cao's hiring edict, as new talents would flood the courts, joining different cliques under these two competing brothers, as many would hedge their bets and their futures on either Cao Pi or Cao Zhi, as the political intrigue would only heat up from here. And as we end our episode with this, hopefully you all enjoyed it enough to drop a like to support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!